Hey everybody, it's Mike Frieder with On-Call Compliance Solutions, and we're here with another compliance tip. One of the most frequent questions that we get here as we're going through our NIST SP 800-171 gap analysis and solution design process is, what is an identifier? And of course, like anything else, there's a simple, short answer to this question if you know exactly what it means. So, like many of the terms used in the complex compliance standard, identifier could be many different things. But believe it or not, most often the answer is as simple as it's just a username, right? So maybe the username to log into your computer, maybe the username in front of your email address. But okay, so of course to make things a little bit more complicated, because hey, when it comes to compliance, it can always be a little bit more complicated. There are other types of identifiers that could be used, right? So IP addresses could be an identifier of a device. A MAC address could be an identifier of a device. But in the case of Control 3.5.5, prevent the use of identifiers for a defined period of time, the answer most often just simply involves your system username and the policies surrounding how you do usernames. So maybe how you do the username in Active Directory, assign email addresses, things like that, and of course how you manage them. So hopefully you're still with us, but let's kind of move along here. So at 3.5.5, it's really just requiring a unique username for anyone with access to the system, and further requires a unique username to not be reused, at least for a defined period of time. So here's an example, right? We have Jason Smith. Jason Smith is maybe our chief operating officer of the company. And Jason Smith has got all kinds of access to sensitive information, including CUI, so maybe some personnel records, maybe some control technical information. So Jay Smith at some point leaves the company. Bye-bye, Jason Smith, sorry. And so he's gone, and now a new person comes in. Her name is Janet Smith. Janet Smith is going to be our new receptionist. And all her job is to answer the phone. She doesn't need to have access to any sensitive information, no personnel records, certainly no CUI. We wouldn't want her seeing any of that because she hasn't gone through mandatory CUI training. So, and then what happens is IT goes to recreate that username, right? That J Smith username. And all of a sudden, Janet Smith has got access to all of Jason Smith's files and information and shares, and all that sensitive information all of a sudden sort of gets exposed to someone without the training, and more importantly, someone that, again, just doesn't have that role in the company. So things get worse, maybe Janet can access things remotely that she shouldn't have to, and all kinds of bad permissions. Again, just a poorly managed policy. So there should always be a defined period for disabling that identifier or username. Again, if Jason Smith leaves, that username should be able to be disabled for a defined period of time in which IT can audit the system, make sure they've gotten all of Jason Smith's permissions out, allowing for a clean reboot of Janet Smith when she comes on board. Or more importantly, another great best practice might be just don't ever reuse that identifier or that username again, right? You can't accidentally give somebody permissions if they are a whole different user. So again, great reasoning behind not reusing the system identifiers, or at least certainly not without a defined period of activity or a defined period of time. So great question. That is, so what about what about the defined period of time, right? What is a significant period of time? That's a good question. That is why the never again best practice is strongly recommended. It helps keep the bad guys away. Basically, if you've got a J Smith and that winds up being reused, or maybe an expired credential is found on the internet, hey, maybe we have a little system compromise. But on the other hand, if we just simply make a J Smith 2, well then the original J Smith permissions can't be reapplied. So it all makes perfect sense, but who could have ever figured out that an identifier really could be anything from a username to an IP address? Really pretty confusing if you're not very familiar with this stuff. So a good resource for guidance on identifiers is NIST Special Publication 863-3. Again, not going to bore you with those details, but we will discuss usernames in a further compliance tip on down the line. And meanwhile, join us again next week for another great, helpful DFARS, NIST, and CMMC compliance tip. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button for more compliance tips, and happy compliance getting.